Greetings to all of you, and I'm making this video presentation on the calculation of the breakpoint to MIC quotients that we are doing routinely at our institute at Ames Mangalgiri Department of Clinical Microbiology. This is where I'm sitting right now. This for those who don't know that where Mangalgiri is located. This is on the just almost on the eastern shores, around 100 kilometers away from the Bay of Bengal at this particular notch at Vijayawada. And today I'll be talking about how to calculate the breakpoint MIC quotients and how we are doing it at our institute using a Excel based tool. So should we report only the MIC values or there is something beyond that? And what exactly are the breakpoints? Many of I think my videos on YouTube are already discussing those things, the basics about the PK and the PD, how the antibiotic is distributed when it is given IV or oral, how the absorption happens, how the distribution happens, how is it metabolized, whether it is uh, hepatic metabolism or a renal metabolism, how is it excreted, what are the different proportions in which it is binding to the proteins, and what actual concentration reaches at the target site depending on the oxygen concentration and the pH of the actual site of the infection, whether it's an abscess or a skin or soft tissue infection or a bloodstream infection or a lung infection, and the final concentration that actually reaches the site that is represented by the MIC, that is the actual value which is going to exert the effect at the particular site, and that is where the pharmacodynamics is involved. So if we just go through quickly through the PKPD, that the pharmacokinetics is what the body does to the drug, and the pharmacodynamics is what the drug does to the body, and this is the point where it actually meets over here, where there's you give a particular dosage, that dose reaches a particular concentration in the serum. This is where we are really concentrating about the breakpoint to MIC quotients, because we'll be primarily focusing on the concentrations achieved in the blood. Then eventually it reaches a concentration at the site of the infection, and then ultimately exerts the biological effects. So this is the junction where the MIC really matters. So we know that the as per the current dosing systems or the WHO or the anatomical therapeutic classification defined daily dosings, the dosings will be different for individuals with different structures, whether it's a lean or a thin person or a medium uh, person of a medium build or a person with a heavy build. So it'll all depend on what is the volume of distribution. That means the virtual space in the human body in which the entire antibiotic gets distributed. So, for example, the volume of distribution for tigecycline is very, very, very high. So, the moment you give it intravenously, so it does not stay in the blood, it immediately gets distributed in that virtual space, and that is the virtual space, of distribution. So that's why does not remain in the blood. It immediately diffuses into skin and soft tissues, and therefore it's a drug of choice for skin and soft tissue infections and the complicated intra-abdominal infections. So that's why we must know what is the virtual space in which the antibiotic is getting distributed. So even if they have a high BMQ, but they may not get concentrated in the blood, so there's no point giving such antibiotics for bloodstream infection. Same goes for drugs which do not get concentrated or do not have a particular effect at a particular site, like for example erythromycin and clindamycin and chlorphenicol in the urine, or daptomycin in the lung. So there's extensive discussions on these that we do in our advanced AMS workshops at Ames Mangalgiri. So the PD parameter, basically what we think about is that MIC is the highest dilution or the lowest concentration showing the no visible growth, but it's not actually a true value, because if you look at the Vitek reports, you'll see that the MIC of one antibiotic is 1 and the other one is shown as less than 1. We take that other one less than 1 as equal to 1, but it could be zero point 0.5, it could be 0.25. It's just that the machine is not able to measure the concentration or the MIC value less than 1. So that's why it shows as less than 1, but not as zero point 0.5 or as 0.25, like that. So it is just the MIC is just the observed minimum. For example, if the MIC of less than 16 means it could be an MIC from 9 to 15, it could be like that. So it does not represent the in vivo concentration, and it is a myth who that the lower the MIC, better is the antibiotic. This is a myth. So that's why we must take care of this particular protocol. That if we are reporting just the MIC values, the clinicians will believe that the lower the MIC, the better the drug is. So it's not such the case. You have to be very careful on that. So MIC is just the phenotypic endpoint in a defined and a very standardized but a highly relative system. So we are measuring MIC in the lab, but ultimately we are extrapolating it to the human body, which is a highly relative system, which the previous diagrams had shown that there's a myriad of uh, 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 factors which are involved in the distribution of the antibiotic in various places. So the MIC measured in vitro is not always that happens in vivo, and but at the same time, the minimum inhibitory concentration, the MIC, is a breakpoint that is a standard measure of activity of the drug against the bug that is in vitro, and we are extrapolating it to in vivo. And of course, we use broth microdilution as the gold standard. So, are the MICs related to the dose of the antibiotic? So, this is also a very important question that answers for this. The answer is given in CLSI also as to how the doses are given in CLSI against a particular MIC value. And above that, you may either have to increase the dosage or you might have to increase the frequency of the antibiotic. So, are the antibiotics the dose has got any relation to the MIC values? So, if we see this diagram, on the left we see, let's say we have developed a new drug against a gram-negative bacilli. What we do is first we have to check that if it is resistant, intrinsically or inherently resistant to a particular set of strains that we call as the wild type strains or the pan susceptible isolates, in which there is no acquired resistance mechanism. There may be an intrinsic resistance mechanism, like you may have a pan susceptible protease, but it will always be resistant to colistin, polymyxin B, and nitrofurantoin. It will always be resistant. It might be susceptible to third generation cephalosporins. It might be even susceptible to ampicillin, but it will be resistant to nitrofurantoin. So that's the intrinsic resistance. And such strains which do not have any acquired resistance mechanism, they might have an intrinsic resistance mechanism. Such are the wild type strains. So these are strains are very, very important. We have a tendency in our labs to stock all the carbapenem resistant isolates that we'll do a study on them someday. We tend to stock the ESBLs or the AMCs, but then eventually it is the pan susceptible isolates which are really important, that will help us understand what are the baseline values that we call as the epidemiological cutoff values for a particular antibiotic against the pan susceptible isolate. So that is the reason why we need to stock and maintain those pan susceptible isolates. So first we do the MIC testing. So MIC is just a minimum inhibitory concentrations in the wild type strain. So that determines our epidemiological cutoff values or the ECOF values, that is commonly called as in the EUCAST terminology. So after that we go in for animal studies and we determine that what are the toxic doses, and the doses which are comfortably tolerated by the animal, does that dose is able to produce a concentration in the serum that is higher or much higher as compared to the MIC values. So in that case, such an isolate will definitely, if such a drug is given to this particular animal, in that case, if the wild type strain is infected, definitely it will respond. But then at the same time, we also have to see what happens if we start injecting with a clinical strain. So in the clinical strain or the clinical isolate, which will have some or the other resistance mechanism, and there will be some associate resistance mechanism. You might think that it is susceptible to let us say piperacillin tazobactam. So piptazo represents the wild type phenotype for piptazo, but at the same time that piptazo might be susceptible, but it might be resistant to ciprofloxacin, and that same cipro could be carrying maybe some other maybe a sub inhibitory or a subclinical gene of an ESBL, or a inducible AMC also could be there. So there might be some associated resistance. So don't think that piperacillin tazobactam is susceptible, so it's a wild type strain for piptazo. For cipro, it is resistant, so it's a non-wild type strain for cipro. It's not like it is a pan non-wild type strain. So when we extrapolate these concentrations achieved in the animals to the actual clinical isolates, then we see, okay, now in this case the MIC value in the wild type strain was 0.0625. In this case, the MIC value of the wild type strain for that particular antibiotic is 0.125 and we are able to achieve a concentration of, let us say, 50 microgram per ml. So that is quite high as compared to the MIC of the clinical strain. So this definitely it will respond. So yes, you can go ahead and then we go in for the clinical trials as per for as to what is the amount of drug that should be given and what will be the long-term side effects if there is any bone suppression, bone marrow suppression, any sublethal or toxic side effects or any adverse drug reactions are there. So those drugs go in for the clinical trials, and then we study the PKPD profile in the humans as to at what frequency should the antibiotic be given and at what dosage should it be given. What is the kind of profile that it is following? So if you see the appendix E of CLSI carefully, you'll see that this is table 2A of Enterobacter. So if you see the antibiotic, this is the MIC values as per table 2A. So if the cefepime MIC values for the though the clinical isolates is 2 or less than 2, then in that case we can give a dose of 1 gram every 12 hourly. But what if the MIC value is increased from 2 to 4? Then in that case, you'll have to give 1 gram every 8 hourly instead of 12 hourly, or we have to give 2 gram every 12 hourly. So in this case, you're doubling the dose, keeping the frequency same, or you are increasing the frequency, keeping the dose same. So when the MIC has increased, and you have to increase the dose, and such cases you have tested them in clinical trials, these values they become your susceptible dose dependent values, or these are also known as the PKPD cutoffs. Similarly, if the MIC further rises to 8, in that case, you'll have to give cefepime as 2 gram administered every 8 hourly. So if you are giving 2 gram cefepime every 8 hourly, in any case, you will be covering this particular isolate as well. So if the clinician thinks that, okay, should I go in for 1 gram BD or should I go in for 2 gram BD? Should I go in for 2 gram TDS? You can go in for a higher dose in case you're suspecting that this strain might mutate and the MIC might rise from 0.125 to 0.25 or maybe zero point 0.5, especially like cases of Enterobacter cloacae. So, so this basically SDD is the validated values, the validated breakpoints against the increased MIC value. So when the MIC value increases and you have validated that dose with a successful outcome, that MIC value becomes a susceptible dose dependent. Now, when it comes to CLSI, same protocols are being followed. It's just that CLSI does not validate them clinically. They do not use the term SDD, they use the term SIE, that is susceptible with increased exposure. So the entire EUCAST, you'll see a list of antibiotics over here, and the standard dose and a high dose. Simple. There's no other complication. You just have standard dose and high dose. There's no concept of SDD. They just know that yes, this is a time dependent antibiotic, so you have to increase the frequency. This is a concentration dependent antibiotic, so you have to increase the dosings. It's as simple as that. So depending, like I just spoke about the what do you call as the pharmacological characteristics or the pharmacological signature of the antibiotics. So there are three kind of antimicrobials or antibiotics. One, the first, this is the concentration dependent antibiotic. That means it is the concentration, ultimately concentration reached in the serum, in the serum that will achieve the proper bactericidal kill in that case. And then we have the time dependent antibiotics, totally a different, you can say it's a 180-degree term. Those antibiotics which are acting on the actively dividing bacteria, right? Like the beta lactam drugs or the carbapenems or the BLBLA combination, they're all time dependent antibiotic. And third kind are the time dependent with moderate to persistent post antibiotic effect. So basic fundamental is that the moment you give a single dose of an antibiotic IV, it reaches a very high concentration in the blood called as Cmax value, and then it slowly falls. So basically, this you are giving it as a bolus dose, not as a continuous infusion or extended infusion. You're giving it as a bolus dose. So it reaches a concentration called as Cmax concentration, and then gradually it falls down to zero. And then this is the on the y-axis you have the concentration of the antibiotic, and on the x-axis you have the time in hours. Now because this is the concentration on the y-axis. This value over here, this red line, this dotted line is the MIC value over here. So this is the MIC of that particular strain. So what happens with the concentration dependent antibiotics, which are like aminoglycosides and quinolones, if you can see carefully that aminoglycosides and quinolones both act on the bacterial genetic machinery. So the aminoglycosides act on the 30S ribosome, the tetracyclines act on the 50S, quinolones act on the DNA gyrase. So they damage the bacterial genetic machinery, and therefore they create a much stronger kill. They have got a good post antibiotic effect because they are damaging the bacterial genetic machinery. At the same time, antibiotics which are acting on the cell wall or the surface, like the beta lactam drugs, they are the ones which are dividing on the actively dividing bacteria. So they require a greater exposure time. Understood. So basically, what is the concentration dependent antibiotics? That means they will reach high concentration. Then the high concentration creates a good bactericidal kill, and therefore their concentration OD dose is much more important for the drugs like aminoglycosides. Maximum you can go in for BD doses like for ciprofloxacin, but for aminoglycosides, which are the core of our antibiotic usage, and the beta lactam drugs also their core. But aminoglycosides and fluoroquinolones you have to give as a OD dose, whereas for the time dependent antibiotics, which are acting on the actively dividing bacteria, for that we have to go on for the extended infusions or the continuous infusions or the, you can say, prolonged infusions, whatever term that you want to call it. But they are not to be given as bolus doses. So if you're giving piptazo or amikacin, or sorry, piptazo or meropenem as a 30 minutes bolus dose, that's not a good thing to do. You have to go give it as 3 hours infusion only. At the same time, this third variety, they are time dependent, but with moderate to persistent post antibiotic effect, like for example, glycopeptides and linezolid. So they have both the activities. So in their case, the total amount of antibiotic, whether you're increasing the dose or whether you're increasing the frequency, doesn't matter. But basically, total dose of the antibiotic is that all that matters. So in the first class, concentration dependent, they have to give us OD doses in high concentrations. The time dependent antibiotics, they have to be given as extended infusion or a prolonged infusion, and when required, they will also be given as a continuous infusion, typically the carbapenems. So ultimately, what happens in all these cases, the denominator, they have a constant denominator, that is the MIC. So how do they measure what is the signature, or I can say what is the PKPD index for these antibiotics? Is that the concentration dependent antibiotics have got a PKPD index called as Cmax to MIC ratio. The time dependent antibiotics have got a fraction of the time when the concentration above the MIC. So that means your dosings are at 8 hours, and you want 40% or 50% time. So 50% times, that means 4 hours during that dosings, the concentration of the antibiotic should be of the MIC. So that means 50%. So T more than MIC means the percentage of the time where the antibiotic concentration is above the MIC. So I won't talk about this in greater detail. We'll straight away skip to the breakpoint to MIC quotients. What is it actually talking about is the efficacy or the efficiency of the antibiotic. Now, if you see this particular table, what are breakpoints? So breakpoints are nothing but concentrations. These are concentrations that separate different populations of bacteria. So if you see this typical table, we have got two types of breakpoints. One we call as a zone diameter breakpoints, the other we call as the MIC breakpoint. So right now we'll talk about the MIC breakpoints. Now, broth microdilution is the gold standard by which the MIC values are determined. We have first the epidemiological cutoff values, then we have the clinical cutoff values, which are classically given in the table 2 of CLSI M100, for which we hunt every year. So these are the MIC values, and what do they really mean is that on, if you see these tables, you'll see the zone diameters in these are the breakpoint zones, and then we see the MIC values, which is less than 1, like for example this case less than 1 or less than equal to 0.5 or less than equal to 1, less than equal to 1. These are the breakpoints, susceptibility breakpoints. That means at this any isolate that has got an MIC value of 1 or less than 1 is likely to respond to the usual doses of doripenem. if the MIC value is zero point 0.5 or less than zero point 0.5 for ertapenem, then it is likely to respond at the usual concentration of ertapenem. So that is what this really means. So this is the meaning of MIC value. So, but how low the actual MIC is. So if the breakpoint susceptibility breakpoint in MIC is 1 over here, for the this is for the overall cutoff values, right? This is for the class, or you can say this is for the class Enterobacterialis. Now, if there is an isolate that has got an MIC value of 0.125 or 0.25 for doripenem versus ertapenem, the MIC value is again same 0.125. So both values are 0.125, but which is more efficacious? That is where we need to understand this concept of breakpoint to MIC quotient. Now let us say we come back to the same graph of that I just showed you before also, that you give an antibiotic, it reaches a concentration in the blood, that is Cmax value, then it tapers off slowly, and this total area under the curve is the total amount of the antibiotic that has been given to the patient. Now let us say we have a case of MRSA, that is isolated from a case of psoas abscess, and the MIC for drug A and drug B, right, is 1. Both for drug A, we are testing for two drugs, drug A and drug B. So drug A has got a susceptibility breakpoint of 8 microgram per ml, the way that we showed for doripenem and Enterobacterialis, like that only. It's just that there's a different value over here. That was 1 microgram per ml. This is 8 microgram per ml. So that's the susceptibility breakpoint of drug A is 8 microgram per ml. The susceptibility breakpoint of drug B is 2 microgram per ml. Now what happens? Now, according to you, which drug is more effective and why? Now what happens over here, that we'll see that MIC for both the antibiotics is 1. But this is both for drug A and drug B. Same MIC value, which is more efficacious. So the basic principle is that the farther away the susceptibility breakpoint is, the farther away the susceptibility breakpoint is from the MIC of that particular isolate, the more efficacious it is. So that means in this case, the MIC is over here, but it will respond, this drug A will respond to isolates with MICs as high as 8. But in this case, the MIC is only 1. So that means drug A is definitely much more efficacious. So this is the ratio. This ratio of the susceptibility breakpoint divided by the MIC of that particular isolate that is achieved. That is the breakpoint to MIC quotient. The same thing if you see at drug B. The drug B, the susceptibility breakpoint of drug B is 2 microgram per ml. That means all those MRSA isolates which have got an MIC of 2 or less than 2 will respond. So let's say the MIC was, in this case, was 4, right? If the MIC was 4 in this case, drug A would have responded because 4 would have come somewhere over here at this particular line. So 4 would have responded for drug A, but 4 for drug B. An MIC of 4 for drug B would not have responded because the susceptibility breakpoint of drug B is much, much lower. So that's why this distance, the distance of the susceptibility breakpoint from the MIC value, determines how efficacious that drug is likely going to be. Now, why I'm saying likely going to be, because this is again a theoretical concept. It might be different at different places. For example, drug A does not reach any concentration at the site of the infection, whereas drug B reaches. So in that case, drug B would be more efficacious. So we don't have to look only at what is happening in the serum. We have to see is what is actually happening at the site of the infection. So this is again, this is a theoretical concept, but a very good concept. So it can be used primarily for the isolates from blood isolates, so the blood isolates, right? So if I just ask you the question, which one is drug A and drug B? So the answer to this particular question is that drug A is your Teicoplanin and drug B is your Vancomycin. That is the reason why we recommend, or we normally give or recommend Teicoplanin in our MRSA reports. So breakpoint to MSE quotient is a new method that has been used. I've been using for the past almost 6-7 years now, and it does have definitely better values. And this is the reason where those people from BioMQ, they show you these panels. This is the older panel, the N280 panel and N281 panel they used to have earlier, and I really used to like this panel because it had ampicillin and third generation cephalosporin in the same card, and I could use it for Salmonella typhi. And we found that ampicillin in Salmonella typhi has got better breakpoint to MIC quotients as compared to ceftriaxone. So we had the values of ceftriaxone MICs as 1 over here. So you see the susceptible breakpoint is also 1. So 1 by 1 is again 1. So the BMQ for ceftriaxone for Salmonella typhi was only 1. Whereas even if you get a MIC value of ampicillin as 2, you might say 2 is higher than ceftriaxone, so it will not respond. But at the same time, you see the susceptibility breakpoint of ampicillin in Salmonella typhi or in Enterobacter generally, you'll see that is 8. So 8 divided by 2 would be 4. So that is again better than 1. That is one of the reasons why we used to recommend ampicillin instead of third generation cephalosporins in our cases in our previous institute. This is just one of the reports of MRSA. If you see over here, the Teicoplanin and Vancomycin MICs, they are both same, both are zero point 0.5. Whereas this is the example I gave you that the susceptibility breakpoint of drug A, that was Teicoplanin, is 8. Whereas for drug B, that is vancomycin, is 2. So the MIC value is the same, but if you divide 8 by 5 is 16. If you divide 2 by zero point 0.5 is 4. So definitely the ratio of 16. That means this particular strain is 16 times lower than the susceptibility breakpoint. So that means that the normal concentrations given for teicoplanin, it will reach 16 times the concentration which are required to kill that particular strain. So definitely in this case, teicoplanin, if you see again the ratio of 16 divided by 4 over here, so that means teicoplanin would be 4 times more effective than vancomycin for a treatment in this case. Similarly, just the only reason is that this is a report from a previous institute. In this case, I have recommended Vanco and Genta, despite the fact that the Teicoplanin MIC is much more as compared to MIC is much less and the breakpoint MIC quotient value is much high. Still, I've gone for vancomycin just because during those times, vancomycin was considered to be drug of choice as per IDSA because teicoplanin is not approved by IDSA. That's the only reason we have recommended vancomycin. Otherwise, teicoplanin would fare much better because it's less nephrotoxic as compared to vancomycin and may not require therapeutic drug monitoring also. Now coming to the concept again of the mutant selection window. Why we need to have a high BMQ is because we want to cover the mutants also. Now, what is these mutants? So these mutants are those bugs which, or you can say they're the part of that clone, the isolate which is causing the infection. So they are part of that clone which has got a higher MIC values than the remaining of the clone. So let us say if we see the MIC of the entire that particular strain was this. So at the same time, there'll be some mutants which will got higher MIC values than the rest of the entire isolate, and then at a higher concentration, these mutants will get killed. So this is the mutant prevention concentration. So this is the mutant selection window. So if your antibiotic is concentration is less than the mutant prevention concentration, then in that case, mutants will get selected and you are likely to get a chronic infection or a mutation. So that is the reason why you need to know the BMQ so that higher the BMQ values, it will be able to cover this particular mutation selection window. So mutant selection window is an antimicrobial concentration range extending from the MIC required to block the growth of wild type bacteria up to that required to inhibit the growth of the least susceptible single step mutant. So somewhere over here, somewhere over here, there'll be 1 or 2 mutants which will have higher MIC values than the remaining of the actual strain. So that means we have to have a higher concentration. So same principle gets extended both for the concentration dependent antibiotic as well as a time dependent antibiotic. So when we say yes for concentration dependent antibiotic, yes, you must have a very high concentration. That is good. In any case, it's going to be 8 or 10 like that for amino glycosides. But at the same time, for the time dependent antibiotics also, the percentage or time the percentage of time when it has to be above the MIC for a longer level, even that level has to be 4 times the MIC as mentioned over here. So the concentration dependent antibiotics, the Cmax to MIC ratio has to be more than 4. But at the same time, for a time dependent antibiotics also, percentage or time when it is above the MIC has to 4 times the value of the MIC above, it has to be the MIC. So to cover that mutation prevention concentration. Just to give you one example of our personalized AST reports, we do have a lot of pan-susceptible isolates which we enter on our WHONET, and this is one of the WHONET reports. This is the raw data that is entered on the WHONET. And what we do is we customize our AST report. This is the bloodstream infection report of a pan-susceptible Klebsiella pneumoniae. Now, in this case, which would be the most effective antibiotic? So, in this case, we have customized this report. We have removed, as per the cascading, we have removed the tier 4 and a tier 3 and a tier 2 antibiotics, and as per what are the restricted and what are the restricted antibiotics, or that we don't like, colistin we will not give. So those we have removed, and at the same time we have done this breakpoint to MIC calculation ratio over here. So we see that the cefepime MIC was 0.125. So 0.125 when 2 is the breakpoint, 2 divided by 0.125 is 16. So in this case, we have given the drug of choice as a cefepime 1 to 2 grams IV every 8 hourly over 3 hours extended infusion as a monotherapy. Because this is a pan-susceptible isolate, we did not require to add any other antibiotic. So just plain simple cefepime in the PKPD dosings of a 3-hour infusion will be good enough. Now I'll just give you a live demo before I continue with the further reports. I'll just give you a live demo. I'll just escape this part and I'll go to the this. Now this is the Excel sheet that has been made in our institute. That if you see, it'll typically it'll show you that it looks like your Vitek report. So what we've done is we made panel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 panels we made. This is exactly as per the chart given to us by Biomuro. So panel 1 is Enterobacter in AST 235 panel. Panel 2 is Enterobacter in AST 405, near 406, P628, Pseudomonas in 406. So all these panels are there. So our uh, 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 data entry operator, senior assistant, Mr. Venkateshwar Rao. We sat with him and we told him that we need you to put up the formulas over here. And the same pattern, what we see over here, this is amoxiclav, piptazone, the same very sequence. This is how the AST report also comes out from our Vitek as a printout. So we can just quickly keep on entering the values, and then it will calculate our BMQs. Like for example, if the moxiclav MIC is coming as 4, we just enter 4. Next is piptazo 2. Ciprofloxacin, let us say, is coming as 64, right? Ciftriaxone is coming as 32. So, so this is the ratio that we've already added, and then over here it's calculating the BMQs on its own. Cefoprosulbactam, let us say it's 8. Cefpime is coming as 0.125. It's come as 0.12 only, so it's pan susceptible. Ertapenem is, let's say, coming at 0.25. Imipenem is coming as 0.25, right? Meropenem coming as 0.25. Amikacin coming as, let's say, 2. Gentamicin as 1. So again, you might think that amikacin MIC is higher and gentamicin MIC is lower, so it's better to give gentamicin. Whereas in this case, see, the BMQ is 2. So if I just go down a little bit more, if I add ciprofloxacin as 4 over here, it will just give me as resistant. Now these are the ones which I'll avoid over here. So this is, I'll avoid because this is for Enterobacter. Ticycline we're not giving for blood. Fosfomycin only for urine. Colistin, I'm not entering the over here till we do the CBD, the colistin broth discolosion test. For cotramoxo, let us say I enter it as 20. Now comes the fun part. This is the extended panel of our that we put up for our 405 card. So we are putting up cefoxitin over here. Let us say cefoxitin is coming as 23. Now this is KBDD. This is Covey-Watt distribution method. So we have put it as 24. So this also we put up it as. So we have entered this formula over here. Cefotaxime, let is coming as 12. Cefotaxime clav coming as 10, that we commonly see as inducible AMC. Ampicillobactam is coming as 17. Sifta AV is coming as, let's, 24. Astronam coming as 12. So it's most likely ESBL along with an AMC, and chloramphenicol 25. So this is how we are doing the entry. So we just copy paste this table on our Word files of our AST reports. I'll just copy it and I paste it, and then voila, I've got and then I'll just remove this part from my Excel sheet. So this is how we are easily calculating our BMQs without the use of buying any kind of expensive software that is being promoted. This is a plain simple tool. I can share, anybody who wants to send me a WhatsApp or an email, preferably an email. I'll send this tool to you. This is a plain simple Excel sheet that we are ready to share with anybody from in Mangalgiri. Similarly, we can go the same thing. We can do it for panel number 3. Similarly, we have added the breakpoints over here also, right? So what you do in the end, that you obviously don't want to, you just erase this thing. You just erase this thing. Everything will go, right? So you want to now start in for a new isolate. So again you start afresh. So you can add, if you want to add this, you can add this. You want to remove this inducible amps, you can remove it also depending on the isolate. Now again I'll go back to my presentation and I'll just show you exactly how we are doing it. So um, this is just a minute. I'll just minimize it. Yeah, I'll go back to my presentation over here. So right over here, right? Okay. Now this is the GN card, right? This is a GN405 card. So this is identifying E. coli. So now if you recall that Excel sheet, this sequence of antibiotic goes exactly as which is mentioned on our Excel sheet. So you just have to quickly keep on just entering 16.4, 16.8, 64, 16.32. So immediately, so there's no issue because we have kept the sequence of antibiotics like that only. So this sequence goes like this, meropenem, then again amikacin starts, so it goes like this. So we see that this sequence is being followed in that Excel sheet over here. Now, how do we extrapolate that? So what we do is we enter all our AST reports on a HUNET. So our senior resident, he does that. And then let's say this is a bloodstream infection caused by an E. coli, which appears to be cefoxyrin resistant, probably an AMC, along with this is third generation susceptible. Okay, so this is right. So this is the one for this one. This is what we've done. See, this is amoxiclav. So we have amoxiclav is MIC was 32. So we added 32 over here. So automatically it took all the values. We just copy pasted the table and pasted on our Word file which we made from this PDF. So we have all these the MIC values over here, the susceptibility. So we have cascaded. See, we have cascaded uh, cefuroxime in this case. We have cascaded. There are no, see, for cefuroxime sulbatum, there, even though Vitek gives you, but we have removed it because CLSI does not give any breakpoints for cefuroxime sulbatum. In this case, we found that the breakpoint to MIC quotient again for cefepime was very good, 16. So that is why we gave it as a drug of choice. Now, because this was invasive bloodstream infection, we have gone in for a combination therapy, and because this could be an antibiotic naive AMC producer. So in this case, that's how we. This is another example of our AC report of E. coli, possibly an ESBL AMC producer, and in this case, again we have gone in for the BMQ related reports, and this is the options that we give. The treatment options, that is possibly ESBL AMC co-producer. So we should be avoiding drugs like third generation cephalosporins and drugs like imipenem and the inducers of the AMC beta lactamases. Therefore, we have gone in this case for drugs like um, in this case, we have gone for meropenem. In this case, you can see the breakpoint MIC quotient is 4 over here. This is possibly ESB-LAMC co-producer. Ceftriaxone also resistant. Amikacin is coming as susceptible. Gentamicin is coming as resistant. So we've gone in for a mero and amikacin dosings. And uh, we have kept ertapenem for OPAT, that is outpatient antimicrobial therapy. So in this case, the best treatment option, like I told you, that amikacin. Now 25 to 30 microgram per milligram per kg body weight. This is the EUCAST dosing. The CLSI dosings are 15 milligram per kg. So normally CLSI goes little slower as compared to EUCAST. So that's why their dosings are lesser in concentrations. We follow the amikacin, the dosing for from EUCAST. So we are recommended amikacin use as a single dose over 30 minutes, followed by time gap of 30 minutes, because these are both Y site incompatible antibiotics. That means you cannot give both the drugs at the same time from the same Y site. Y site means there is one thing that's going inside the vein. There are two external, you can say, the inlets, and from those inlets you cannot give them simultaneously. We have to give them separately. They are Y site incompatible drugs. So that's why we go in for amikacin. So OD dose followed by time for 30 minutes. Let the amikacin go inside. Then we go in for meropenem at 2 gram, 8 hourly dosing over 3 hour infusion. And because Meropenem is not a very stable antibiotic, and it is available as 1 gram dosing. So we give it as 1 gram over 1.5 hours, followed by another 1 gram for the next 1.5 hours. And for we in our reports also we are writing down that 500 milligram of meropenem is an underdosing. Please take note of this thing. And at the same time, for because we are recommended ertapenem also in this case, so we have gone for OPAT also. So for example, you just want to give an antibiotic to a patient, you don't have to keep the patient in the hospital. You can save the patient's money, keep him on outpatient antimicrobial therapy basis, on OPAT basis. So both are OD doses, because ertapenem is the only carbapenem that follows the concentration dependent pharmacokinetics because of its high binding to the albumin proteins. That is why we need to check the albumin levels of ertapenem before we start ertapenem. So it has to be at least 2.5 gram percent of albumin or above before starting ertapenem as an OD dose of 1 gram. Before that, again, same amikacin 25 milligram per kg body weight has to be given. And we should always consider things like source control, drain, and debride the site of infection. And these are the footnotes that we are putting on all our ASC reports. This is another same example, same GN405, because most of the isolates, like if it's a pan drug resistant, if it is a pan drug resistant isolate, like a crab or like a CRE, there's no point going in for the BMQs, right? There's no point because everything will be red on the right side, everything will be resistant. So you straight away go in for either a synergy testing or collagen block disc illusion testing, or you have to test other drugs like chloramphenicol or maybe minocycline or maybe phosphomycin MICs, like those you have to check. But in cases which are mostly which are ESBs or AMC or pan susceptible isolates, you can go in for the BMQs. Like in this case, Enterobacter cloacae isolate is there. So I'll just give you an example how we are reporting Enterobacter cloacae, as we are reporting it as a HEC yes organism, means Hafnia alvea or Enterobacter cloacae, Citrobacter frundi, not Kozeri, Klebsiella aerogenes, and Yersinia enterocolitica. These are the organisms which are dangerous, and they've got an inducible AMC beta lactamase, for which you already have a YouTube video on that. You can please go and scroll the YouTube videos and see what we have to talk about the AMC beta lactamases. In this case, also we've done the breakpoint MIC quotient reporting. But what we found over here is that because this was also a ESBL producer, so that means the cefepime MICs, despite being in the susceptible breakpoint, is 1. Normally we'll find it as 0.125, like that, very low, you'll find 0.125, but over here it is 1. So that means there's definitely an ESBL production is there. Ceftriaxone also is coming as resistant, and there is ESBL production is definitely there. So that means you should try and avoid cefepime in this case. So it is better to go in for a meropenem gentamicin combination in such case. So that's why if you see over here, there's a possible co-production of ESBL with AMC beta lactamase. We are not advocating the use of cefepime, which otherwise is the drug of choice for AMC producing Enterobacterialis. So that is why we are going for a combination of gentamicin 7 milligram per kg body weight as a single dose, followed by a gap, then meropenem 2 gram every 8 hourly as a 3-hour extended infusion. This is the same thing goes for Salmonella typhi. So those who have not entered this thing over here, that first generation and second generation cephalosporin, not to begin in Salmonella typhi, first generation, sorry, not to begin in Salmonella typhi, that should come in your AES system. So if you see this star over here, this is AES modified. So you should not supposed to give the, despite having the MICs within the susceptible breakpoint range, you should not report them as susceptible because of intrinsic resistance in amyloglycosides and first generation cephalosporins in case of Salmonella typhi. Same thing can be extrapolated in case of the gram positives also for Staphylococcus aureus. This is a case of MRSA, isolate from an orthopedics bone and joint infection. This is MRSA, and this is, I don't know, it's a D test positive, maybe it might be written somewhere. Anyway, so same thing we have gone in over here also. If you see over here also, this is the GP628 panel. So Teicoplanin MIC is 0.5, Vanco for Stafford is 1. So if you see this ratio, Teicoplanin 8 to 0.5 is 16. So this is very high. And ideally, glycopeptides should not be given as monotherapy. Ideally, should not be given as monotherapy. That is what the literature says. So we have to combine it with a drug like which has got a second different target like gentamicin. In this case, what we've done is that we are giving teicoplanin septic arthritis doses of 12 milligram per kg, 12 hours apart. 3 loading doses are giving because it is a bone and joint infections. It takes time for the antibiotic to reach the actual site of the infection. So we are giving 3 loading doses followed by 12 milligram per kg as a BD dose, then along with gentamicin 5 to 7.5 gram per kg OD dose. So, and also we are mentioning in our customized AST report that what are the antibiotics which are likely to have good penetration in the bone and joints. So that is how we report our MRSA isolates. This is another isolate that is again, I think it's an MRSA. In the same case, we are giving Teicoplanin. Again, see, this is the one where we are using the e-test. Now, in e-test, you'll get values of MICs which are slightly higher as compared to your broth microdilutions or maybe in your Vitek also. But in this case, we got the Teicoplanin MICs and the Vancomycin MICs both as one. So if you see the BMQs is much better for Teicoplanin. So again, we have recommended Teicoplanin in case along with gentamicin in this particular patient. So that is what the concept of the breakpoint MIC quotient is, and this is a very helpful tool that we are using on a daily basis. Instead of looking at the MIC values, then entering it manually, and then calculating the BMQ, dividing the breakpoint MIC divided by the MIC of the isolate manually. You can just use this particular tool that we have devised today in Mangalgiri, and you can easily calculate your BMQ values also. So this is another case, like we said, that we are recommending more of Teicoplanin as compared to Vancomycin. With that, I end my presentation and I welcome all the listeners of this particular video to the ASPICON 2025 from 4th to 7th of September. ASPICON, this is the annual conference for the Society of for the Antimicrobial Stewardship Practices in India. This is a registered society. It is a national conglomerate of all the aims and all the INIs and all the Institute of National Interest, along with more and more institutes which are joining us, which are even the state level institutes and other also. And it comprises of all clinicians, it comprises of ID specialists, it comprises of surgeons, it comprises of gynecologists, ENT surgeons, microbiologists, pharmacologists, even community stewards and the community and the family medicine department or CFM department, PSM departments also. So we'll be having, so the theme of our conference is the battery, the AAA battery, or I would like to call it as asserting AMR awareness. So you have to charge yourself to assert AMR awareness, and will be having stalwarts like Dr. Atul Goyal himself. He's a professor of excellence and the former Director General Health Services, who has strongly advocated the implementation of the antimicrobial stewardship practices. He himself is a very strong proponent of AMR awareness and AMSP also, and everybody knows. No need to introduce Dr. Pallabri also, and we also have really big stalwart and amazing teachers like Dr. Ranganathan Iyer, Dr. Priscilla Rupali, ID specialist, Dr. Ekta Gupta, she's an eminent virologist, Dr. Sarita Mahapatra, she's a current president of the SASP, Dr. Gagandeep Singh, a world known or a widely known name for antifungal stewardship, and Dr. Nusrat Shafiq from the Department of Clinical Pharmacology at PG at Chandigarh. So we'll be having a lot of good workshops. We are planning around 7 workshops, which will be hosted on 4th of September. The main conference will be from 5th, 6th, and 7th September. So please block your dates and charge yourself to assert AMR awareness at AIMS Mangalgiri, Vijayawada. So we are very well connected. Vijayawada is our airport, and you can come directly. There are numerous flights from all over the places. From Delhi, direct flights are there. From Mumbai, from Hyderabad, from Bangalore, from Chennai. So these are places where you have the direct flights. Otherwise, also we have got a lot of connecting flights. So you are most welcome. Please, we'll be releasing uh, the registration also very soon. So please look forward to it and please do participate in ASPICON 2025. That, thank you so much. Jai Hind.